Shazam! And welcome to the new episode of Three Thoughts. I am your first host, Bryan Kim. I am a candidate for Congress, and last night I tried to watch the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and it has not aged well. Let it live in your memories, kids. Do not try to bring it back.
I'm Lauren, and I'm 20 years old, and I woke up very tired this morning, and I stretched, and I think I popped something in my back, and I feel like I'm 40. So when did that start happening for you guys? Because I feel so freaking old right now.
My back started hurting when I was like 14, and I felt broken ever since. My back was not good when I was 14.
My back has literally never hurt before.
I hate you.
What's up with it? It's just like
just the luckiest motherfucker.
And the douchebag with no back pain is...
My name is Die for Ty. And I also attempted to watch Power Rangers 2. And I walked in on this one part where the robot was like, yo, the robot brought the Black Ranger in. He was like, yo, this is what you brought me in here for? And the robot was like, yeah. And he just starts breakdancing. He's like, this is how you do it, blah, blah. And I'm like, damn, he could just do the robot. He's a robot. I didn't have to bring him all the way here. I was like, this shit's awesome. Like that. I don't know. I didn't really like that part that much. But welcome to Three Thoughts. And
Welcome.
Right on. So up first is our icebreaker from, as always, from Die for Ty.
Alright, so there are a couple of ways I can ask this question. Okay. So, if your soul could have probably been either of these things in the past, or the future's past, or if you could pick any class in an RPG, would it be knight, ninja, pirate, monk, samurai, or robot? Knight,
You go first.
ninja, pirate, monk, samurai, or a robot? I was like, monk?
Am I a robot? Am I a robot or a cyborg?
Robot.
So like full, like am I like an AI though? Like am I like artificially intelligent? Oh, okay, I pick robot.
Yeah.
I want to know all
What
the
are we
things. I want to be
talking
control.
about
I want to know all the
okay.
things. I want to be in control of all the
Not
technology, and I want to see if you're like all of the means of production are like completely automated and cybernetically controlled, and a super powerful AI could basically just could end a nuclear war and could restructure the entire economy from the ground up.
Damn.
And that sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds like way more fun than anything else. I pick robot.
And they can do the robot, so they do it better than any human
I would not bring the Black
The
Ranger
robot
to my secret lair just to teach me how to breakdance, because that's super racist. Be better than Power Rangers, kids.
Destroy all humans equally. No.
I think I would be a pirate because it just sounds like a party on a ship the whole time. You're just drinking, you're smoking your whatevers, and you have a bunch of gold, and you're just executing people all day. And it's just probably really fun. And you're sailing, and you're probably fishing, getting fresh fish and stuff. Like, I think it would actually be fun.
Dope. Fresh fish too. Like, actually, we don't even get that.
I just think it'd be
now.
a lot of good food. I love good food and traveling, and just being a pirate seems like the best way to do it.
Arg. I'd be a pirate too, I think. I thought about this question a lot. And yeah, I do think I'd be a pirate as well. Basically for the same reasons, I think. And I also think I'm like, well, never mind. I'm not gonna say that. But
Say it. Say it.
I can't really.
Say it.
I'm sort of like a pirate now, but not really. But like just not.
I guess like executing
I
people
get a lot of
sounds
booty.
bad.
Is all I mean. You know.
Right? You dress flashy. You get a lot of booty.
Yeah, I'm trying to I don't know. Get an eye patch or a peg leg one day, but my back doesn't even hurt, so I don't think I'll get there. So.
I think the best thing about being a pirate is having the parrot sit on your shoulder
Yeah.
and like echo all the dumb shit.
That's another thing. I love birds.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun to like teach the pirate or teach the bird to say things like "fuck you,"
Yep.
and socialism will win, and the bird will just be like "fuck you, socialism will win." I'm like, yes. Fucking feed him treats. It sounds fantastic.
I would have a crow. You know, crows mimic people.
Really?
Well, not all of them, but the smartest crow is actually the smartest bird in the world, and they mimic people. They've been known to tell jokes by themselves and then laugh afterward. They use tools with their beak. It's crazy.
Dude, I want to do a podcast on crows now.
Yeah, definitely.
All right,
There's
cancel this porn shit. We're talking about birds. But no, for real, we will be talking about pornography when we return.
It's not safe.
And we're back. Cool. So today's topic, we are talking about pornography. Unfortunately for you, we are not making one. That's in the extras. Support us on Patreon. But we will be talking, we're going to start with Lauren, who's going to talk about the evolution and development of pornography. After that, I'll be talking about sex work under capitalism. And we're going to close with Die for Ty, talking about the stigma around sex workers and how they deal with it.
Beautiful. So to begin, I want to quickly point out that porn wasn't always called porn, but yet erotic depictions. And the earliest sign in history that we saw these erotic pornographic depictions were often a subset to religion, art, or all-around culture. We first saw these depictions in history as Paleolithic cave carvings and paintings. And there's Egypt's Turin erotic papyrus, which was just a bunch of scraps of papyrus that had drawn just like sex positions pretty much. And it was dubbed the world's first men magazine. And then the Grecians had a lot of ceramics like on coins or oil lamps or buildings of bestiality and homosexuality. Like I'm sure you guys know, like the god of Pan who had like fornicated with the goat.
Zeus turns into like a swan and a bull and fucks human women.
Yeah, exactly. Just pretty freaky. And pornography has existed throughout recorded history, and it has adapted to each new medium, including photography, cinema, video, and computers and the internet. Production of erotic film started immediately after the invention of motion picture from Austria. John Schwarzer had made total of 52 erotic productions between 1906 and 1911, which was record at the time. Which we know we have far more now and far more options. But magazines such as Playboy, founded by well-known Hugh Hefner in 1953, which became an outlet for men and women of all types and became a great influence in American culture and especially the Vietnam War. Not so positively or negatively, or maybe both. But pornographic videotapes became popular in 1980s, and not too long, DVDs were nationally distributed. Now, porn, what it is today, and what is marketed, and how much it is accessible because of the internet, like choking, vomiting, gangbangs, flushing girls' heads down toilets. It seems that the relationship with sex has changed with all of us, I think, and how we view porn and the types that are out, because when I was looking at it, it seemed a lot more like beautiful and less graphic. Do you like has our relationship with sex changed, or has like merely like the mediums we use changed? What do you guys think?
I think it's probably the medium that we use that changed. I think people just didn't have access to I think weirdos didn't have access to the weird shit that they really wanted until now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I think it's basically just that. But I don't know. It gets weirder and weirder and weirder.
I think we should move away from using the word weird, because it creates this idea that there's like it reinforces this like bourgeois idea that there's like such a thing as like normal sex. And while, you know, the whole idea of like I don't really get the whole like, especially some of the more like when people like being shit on, I don't really get that, or like shitting on other people. Like I get the power thing of shitting on other people.
Like,
you know, I would never want to do it. That seems kind of gross, but like I at least kind of get it, but it seems kind of, I think it seems kind of weird to call it, I think it seems bad to call it weird, because what I was going to say is that like the internet is a means of circulating content, right? And when you only have DVDs and videos, it costs a lot more money to circulate the videos, whereas now I don't think it's so much that it's changed as that there's an increase of access and an increase of openness around fetishes and kinks that used to be kind of like underground, or like a much like smaller subset of the population that was going to spend money on them. You know what I mean? To the point where it's like, if you were lived in 1970 and you wanted to find a video of two chicks like the Two Girls One Cup, nobody's gonna make that. No video store is gonna carry that. You know what I mean? That's like a thing that only happens because of the internet, where it's like, what do you mean these two girls like eat poop like it's ice cream? You know what I mean? It's weird,
got a lot
but
of fame after that.
That's
and
a thing,
I think
man.
It's just like the matter of just like people are realizing that this is just like modern day prostitution. I mean, if you look back to what the word porn was translated to in English, it was writing about prostitutes. And it just seems like the porn industry is just a competition between everybody of who can make the most money out of it. And it's kind of like maybe our relationship with sex and how we use it hasn't changed at all. And it's more, people are more open with it. Like maybe we are in an age, like some type of Renaissance age, that it is more accepted. I mean, escorts and cam girls and how it's more accepted as a profession. It's like, this is what it's evolved to. Like, with the internet. Like, this is, and now there's virtual reality porn.
Yeah.
It's just, it's like, what's after virtual reality porn? A robot?
Fucking hologram robot.
Robot? Like,
yeah,
crazy.
like full, like.
Is it bad? Is it good? Or is it
That's
just
what I wanted to
evolution?
say too. Like, I know, like, and I totally agree with you 100% about like not calling it weird, right?
Yeah, because
But I
homosexuality
do think-
is considered by some people to be weird. You know what I mean? And I think that's a fucked up way to treat people. Like,
I would say, like, I think, all right, so weird to me, I guess what I was thinking about is like fantasy rape or like incest. But I don't know. I mean, the fantasy, that one is the one that's like crazy. And then when we're talking about virtual reality, like holograms and robots, like that gets very creepy.
I have an answer to that. I think what makes it creepy and weird and bad is if it's with like a real person and if it's not consensual.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people have been through a lot of fucked up shit, that could have not even been their fault. But it's like when they're having sex, there are just certain fantasies or voids or things that they want to happen.
psychological drives.
And it's just when they do it to a person and they can't associate what they're doing is wrong, like that's a psychopath. But it's like, let's say it was with a robot and it was with a hologram or through virtual reality now, or now it is through a screen where you're not actually doing anything to harm a person. This is only like a relationship. This is just your relationship with sex.
And it's like, is violence, and it's kind of like that argument about violence in video games, right? Where it's like, because that's, the thing that you bring up about like the consent in rape fantasies and like in rape role play and like how
because
important.
there's some porn people that do that.
And there's not even porn, like
and
there's
it's,
normal.
but it's
too, though.
consensual.
If you consent to it, like that's okay. Like if you consent to it in like your relationship, my problem is like the selling of it as pornography on the internet.
The selling of rape play of rape play, even if okay.
If you want to like do that in your own home, like whatever
with your partner, like that's cool. But is it wrong? Why would it be wrong to sell it?
It's wrong. I feel like a lot of people get the wrong idea, and like, I mean,
like
you
they
were
don't
saying,
explain the nuance of the consent that go into like how to do it like an adult.
Yeah, we can acknowledge that it is not being like marketed as like, I don't know.
Is it being marketed as a fantasy? It's being marketed as like, watch this girl get. But isn't that part of like communicating because it's really it comes back to this argument about violence in video games, right? It's like, is art, and this is like a thing I was going to get into later, but it's like, is the art required to be ethically responsible, right? Because assuming that the videos that are being made are done consensually and are not hurting people any more than capitalism already hurts people under work. I don't want to spoil my thing, but assuming that like the participants in the making of the video are consenting and not being harmed, like how is that different than, you know, the mission in Black Ops where you're undercover with the Russian mob, so you roll into an airport and blow away a bunch of civilians? Because you're playing an undercover, but you're really just fucking massacring civilians the way an undercover would. Like, is it irresponsible for like the defense industry and the gaming industry to be portraying war in this like kind of fetishization of violence, fetishization of nationalism? Is that any different than porn? Because you're basically teaching our kids to be soldiers.
That has been detrimental, and I'm not usually the one to say that. You know what I mean? Like, I play Grand Theft Auto all day, whatever. But I do think, you know, as Americans, we play. I think a lot. I mean, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the video games, but we are very gun crazy, gun ho about guns, and like drones, for instance. We have drones, for instance. Like, you're playing video games in your own house, you go to fucking military, and now you're literally behind like drones. It takes a lot of empathy out of it, and you already didn't have empathy. It's just like playing a video game for you. And I don't know about if it has anything to do with the mass shootings or anything like that either, but we do have the most here too, and I do think we are the biggest consumer of those types of video games as well. So,
like, the porn industry, like, I think, like, what Bryan was saying, like, could, like, going off what he was saying, like, could be responsible for a lot more sexual abuse just because of, like, what is out there now. And, like, the part of, like, the psychological thing you were saying, it's just people don't know, like, where porn came from. And, like, I think people need to look past, like, the camera and who's on the camera and who's the one directing it, and just the fact that, like, women are being exploited. And, like, and it's all, like, for the sake of money and capitalism. And I think that's, like, what Bryan's gonna, like, talk about in the next video.
So that's actually, it's interesting, because that's actually kind of the opposite of my point, and the opposite of like kind of the thing. Like, it's because the thing I was going to say about video games is like, and like with porn, it comes down to porn is a type of art. It's a part of culture, just like you were saying, and especially when you look back at the historical links, how it's always been linked into conceptions of sexuality and femininity and masculine, like conceptions of gender orientation, like conceptions of culture, right? And it's tied into like sex work. The whole, like, one of the whole concepts is that it's tied into the reproduction of a commodity. And the commodity is human labor power. Like, the birthing of babies, how workers are, like, human workers, the birthing of them, how they're raised, how they're trained, how they're educated. Like, all of this is part of what you call the reproduction of labor value as a commodity, right? So this idea that porn is inherently exploitative, I think, comes from this idea that under, like, the problems of sexism and patriarchy as they exist under capitalism. And the reason why it's important to define, like, work and sex work is, like, there's this Marxist feminist named Silvia Federici, and what she says is, we want to call work what is work, so that eventually we can rediscover what is love, and thus create our sexuality which we have never known. And it's this idea that everyone who exists today is alienated from the tribal, communal age where, because if you look at, like, you know, those fertility statues, right, that you're talking about, like, being, and like the cave paintings, right? Mm-hmm. There, a lot of it's tied into this study of, like, from this book called, like, When God Was a Woman. Mm-hmm. And it's like back in the communal mode of production, because everyone has to do the work necessary to survive, everybody's work gets a certain level of veneration and a certain level of respect. And it's only under, like, in the 16 and 1700s, when capitalism starts to develop, that you start to see the criminalization of prostitution and, like, the actual crackdown of the state on it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know that it's like, I think that there is porn that is exploitative and not helpful, and I think there are producers of porn that are bad. But I mean, like, if you look at the fact that, you know, Pornhub is hosting a channel dedicated to like STD health education, which is really excellent. If you look at the fact that they shut down for the Net Neutrality Day,
Okay.
I think there's a lot. Yeah,
But what
I
about,
think it can be.
But what about the revenge porn websites that have
Oh well, that's
thousands and thousands, and that would be considered porn too, because people look at that and they get off to that, and there are hundreds
Right,
and
but how is-
thousands of girls that have been on there unwillingly
Right,
because they
that's-
don't
and
make
that's
their
the po-
profile
and that's
on
the
those
point.
sites. Someone does it and they put their information on there, their address, their school.
No,
what
and I think
sports
that's super
teams they're
fu- no,
on,
and I think that's
their
super
job.
fucked up.
And that is porn too. So it's just like you can. I mean,
It's
yeah,
not
like
porn. It's
is
not,
like an,
revenge porn is not porn like other porn because what
Right, but
makes
the thing-
what makes it revenge porn? It's the
what
fact.
do you mean what makes it revenge?
It's the fact. The point is, it's the fact that the women don't consent to it.
Yes.
That makes it revenge porn, and there's a difference between that. Like, if there's not consent, it's an act of sexual violence versus pornography. Like, to call violence art. It's like there's a big difference between making making movies about killing people and making a movie where the movie is you're murdering someone on screen. And revenge porn is the difference between like, you know, pretending to rape someone without their consent, like for the camera, and actually raping someone on camera.
I guess it's just hard to see like porn like now in 2017 in any positive light for me, just because all of it, like especially on Pornhub, I feel like it doesn't matter what Pornhub is doing as far as STDs or sex education, because it really isn't making the impact it needs to be. And second, a lot of the videos on there is just amateur porn, and there are girls on there that literally have no other means to live but to do this, and a lot of it is force fucking, and it's just what they succumb to. And then they last a year or two because a lot of these directors give them drugs. Like some of it could not, you as the user don't know what is consensual really and what isn't consensual,
right?
Because it is so fantasized. So
How is that different than migrant workers on tobacco farms?
Well, I mean,
because these are people. Because if you're selling, because it comes down to like this idea that selling your body. Like if you think that sex workers sell their body when they don't want to because they're forced to by economic circumstances, but like coal miners or like tobacco farmers like don't, your view of work is being colored.
I didn't say that they don't.
Yeah, but this is my point though, is that right? So your point was that you as the end user don't see the lack of consent and the brutality that go into that. You just kind of go along with it because you're addicted and you like it, right? How is that different than smoking cigarettes?
Maybe not so much.
Right, which is my point. Right, so that's like, and I'm not saying that means that everyone who smokes cigarettes should like all just quit, because there's no such thing as ethical though you should.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism because of the inherently exploitative nature of wage work. So this separation of pornographic actresses and like the work that is acting in pornography, that work, the separation of that work from other types of work is part of the ideology of control. And the same arguments about like, spoiler for my entire talk, the same arguments that like apply, that are like, oh, this is why sex, like the same reasons like why sex work seems exploitative, they're all the same reasons why work itself is exploitative. And rather than like decide that porn is somehow separate or bad, it would be good to integrate it and all sex work into a framework of anti-capitalism that will allow them to become free and work in such a way that is non-exploitative.
That totally should happen.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that was... Ty, what do you got?
Shit,
Does that make sense?
I'm just gonna wait until after your part, you know? And then like put it all together and just, I don't know.
Cool.
You know what I'm saying?
All right.
Porn.
So I'm not saying I want more porn. I'm just saying I think we need a really nuanced look at it, which I will hope to provide when we return.
Times in my life.
Porn needs to be beautiful too. It needs to stop being so ugly and so like raunchy. We need colors and
beautiful,
and you know like
we need like well done porn. Like,
well, you know, like
right. I want
better
porn that makes
stories,
me feel something.
Better actors, you know.
I want to feel.
It's not safe.
And we're back. Cool. So up now, I will be talking about sex work and capitalism, and kind of how to handle pornography as the art of sex, as basically like art at the intersection of art and sex work. So I want to open with that Silvia Federici quote, and it's like why it's so. First of all, it's like why is it important to call it sex work rather than prostitution? This is something that feminists came up with in the 1970s as a way of like reframing the discussion around and like trying to legitimize the oppression felt by people who are engaged in sex work and sex workers. So the quote goes, "We want to call work what is work, so that eventually we might rediscover what is love and create our sexuality which we have never known." So the ideas that are implicit in that quote of hers is that one, like sex work. So there's a couple ideas that are implicit in that, and they're connected to some key feminist ideas back in the day. And one of the big ones that I want to talk about is this idea of emotional labor, right? And this idea of unpaid labor. So there was a campaign back in the 70s called Wages for Housework, where the group of feminists launched a campaign kind of talking about like all the hours that women spend washing dishes, right? All the hours that, you know, capitalism expects women to spend like raising kids. All of the unpaid labor time women are expected to put into cleaning house, right? Whereas like if you had a maid or a professional child rearer or a cook, you know, you'd have to pay someone to do that. But in the American and like Western kind of nuclear family, women are expected to do this fucking work for free.
That's a good point.
So this idea, so this idea of like, so the connection that they make to this is that sex work is a type of work in and of itself, right? So this is Federici again. She goes, "Since work can exist even where there is no money, sex work is not solely a prerogative of professional sex workers." So the idea is that like everybody who fucks is engaged in sex work, even if they're not paid for it, right? Mm-hmm. So sexual freedom does not help. Certainly it is important to women that we are not stoned to death if we are unfaithful or if it is found that we are not virgins. But sexual liberation has only intensified our work. And she's like speaking like in the context of capitalism. "In the past, we were expected to raise children. Now we are expected to have a wage job, still clean the house and have children, and at the end of a double work day, be ready to hop in bed and be sexually enticing. For women, the right to have sex is the duty to have sex and to enjoy it, which is not something that is expected of most jobs." And then, you know, she's talking about like, you know, and while she's speaking specifically about like the heterosexual nuclear family, she also goes on to say, homosexuality and heterosexuality are both working conditions. Homosexuality is a type of workers' control of production, not the end of work. So to kind of put that in the context then of the porn industry, right? The idea then is that the parts of sex work that are inherently exploitative, it goes, "It's undeniably true that many sex workers, if they had access to another source of income, would either leave the sex industry or demand better conditions for themselves. But the same could be said of many supermarket checkers and factory workers. And that ultimately is the only argument against sex work that holds up. It is work, and work is often terrible." Right? So in the context of capitalism, so porn is a huge, in porn specifically, like porn is a huge fucking industry. It's bigger than Hollywood. Hollywood every year makes about 600 movies and 10 billion in profit. Porn releases 13,000 movies and makes 15 billion, like almost half again as much as Hollywood. The porn industry makes more profit than Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA combined.
Damn. Shit.
Pornhub and Xvideo last year were worth $2.5 billion and $3 billion respectively as companies. Xvideo on its own is worth more than Dropbox, CNN, and the New York Times combined. So porn So porn is a massive industry, and at the end of the day, the most important thing, and like the real question is not, is porn ethical? The real question is, how do we do porn ethically? How do we make sure that the people who work in porn are protected, that the distributors face like sensible regulations, but are also like, you know, and that they're held accountable for the way their workers are treated. And I think we need to think about, if we're talking about doing porn right, we need to focus on what putting sex workers in power looks like versus what controlling consumers and porn consumers and the bosses want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in terms of like the questions, one of the questions that I had that I didn't really like kind of have an answer to is like, how is porn different from other is porn different from other types of sex work, like prostitution, you know, and if so, like kind of how is it different?
I feel like it's different in that way because with prostitution, like you are your own self-marketer, and you would be now like prostitution looks like, you know, walking down the street and making like a business exchange, like from you to the person in the car, from you to the person approaching you, or the person that you are willing to engage in this act with. And porn, as far as filming a video, you are your self-marketer in certain cases because you can choose to partake or not, but there is the director and the person who is leading the video, and on the spot, you know, if the girl is consenting to shoot this video, there is a lot of times where, you know, this girl could potentially be drugged, or, you know, just what is happening so fast that it's just recorded anyways, and
Just kind of manipulated.
it's just kind of manipulated like on the spot to where, you know.
Let me pose you a different way of looking at it. I think that that's a problem, because I get where you're coming from. But I think that that's more of a problem of like the modes of control than it is like prostitution versus porn, because in prostitution, like the dark side of that is there are the pimps, right? And these people who like, because sex workers are often the victim of violence, right? You have like, and the police don't protect them. They have to turn to like the criminal protection, right? So you can have these pimps who are like drugging their prostitutes and putting them in situations they don't consent to. Or you can have like the cam girls like Ty was talking about, where it's just them in their laptop. So I think that's more of like, you know, independent prostitutes and actresses and actors versus like kind of more corporatized or businessy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's a management problem, not a prostitution porn problem.
Yeah. I think prostitution should be like legal and regulated. I don't know, what do you think?
I think it should be legal and regulated.
I think it should be legal and regulated. I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure actually. I didn't look this up, but I'm pretty sure it's legal in other places.
It is, yeah, it is legal. So it's decriminalized in other places. And they talked about this thing called the Nordic model, which is basically like the prostitutes themselves, like in an attempt to kind of be progressive, like the prostitutes are not penalized, but the men or the Johns, it's criminalized on the consumption end. And they talk about like one of the feminist analysis of the Nordic model does not often doesn't take into account the financial need that people have. Joan Smith went on for a ride along in Stockholm to like watch them kind of with the police, to watch them do work in Sweden. So, you know, they showed up to the car park where the sex workers work. The driver of the car, who's brought a prostitute to the island to have sex, is arrested on the spot. He's given a choice: admit the offense and pay a fine based on his income, or go to court and thus risk publicity and potential jail time. The woman who hasn't broken any law is offered help from social services if she wants to leave prostitution. Otherwise, she's allowed to go. And even in this best case scenario, of course, ignores the fact that the woman has invested a lot of time, energy, and money into finding and securing this client, only to lose out on her income and be told that she should be grateful for that fact. She now either has to work longer and risk the same thing happening again, or be unable to pay her rent, bills, and groceries.
I was thinking that too. I was like, even if it is legal and regulated, the same stigma and like the same problems that we have in the porn industry, in sex work in general, it's just gonna be pretty much the same. It'll keep popping up until we deal with, I think, the respect of people.
I agree. It's just even if there is like a good system put in place, it's just that the way that people like misuse like, you know, sexual acts, and like just how it just creates other situations that stem from fantasies and people making it reality. Like maybe there's like more depth into just like, you know, I'm not sure.
I think that because it's
very interesting. Like the
There could
deeper
work
you
the
go
other way
down
too,
into
'cause you
it.
could-
Well, there are
legalizing it could be the first step of
getting rid of the stigma,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna say. It's like they talk about how the
Totally see
stigma so Stefan, a sex worker who has shared their story of being raped and degraded by a client who wants to make another appointment, addresses the problem that like without talking about the economic pressures and providing sex workers with more options, we actually further harm at-risk people and ignore the voices of the people we're trying to protect, right? So the sex worker says, had I been in a more financially desperate situation, I probably would have seen the abusive guy again. I know this is the moment when all sex work abolitionists go, aha, I knew it. But that statement doesn't mean that sex work is inherently evil. It means capitalism is. The thing which creates the inequalities causing those situations. For everyone, the sex worker or not, the lower down on the economic migration status food chain you are, the fewer options you have when in situations of extreme difficulty. Just because in a desperate moment a person may return to an abusive client because it is a better choice for them than being rendered destitute, homeless, or deported, doesn't mean that the choice to be a sex worker should be taken away from them, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, street-based, like decriminalizing it will allow more and more people to move into like what you could call like classier or like higher production value sex work, where it's like, you know, you have a brothel, you have like clean closed rooms, you have everybody like who's been through an STD check, you have an equal, like a relatively or a completely equal distribution of
like
wages,
a lot more
right?
safety measures like put into place.
Yeah,
like,
to protect the women, you know what I mean? Like you want to have
even
like
bodyguards would be a good idea. Like
Yeah.
before any sexual encounter would happen, like maybe it would give the men a job and the woman a job, and
yeah, and then
Maybe.
it's also, and it's like you also have security systems, and then it means that like because it's regulated, these men who are providing security are not also physically abusing the women and domineering them at the same time, right?
like there should be a lot of like background checking and documentation, just so that, you know, no one is like forgotten and no one can go unaccountable, you know,
Yeah.
not be held accountable for anything that happens. And, you know, and if somebody does violate someone or violate the rules of whatever's put in
Oh,
place,
yeah.
like they should be punished.
Absolutely.
Like, because then we should be weeding out like the people who are abusing people.
Absolutely.
Because they shouldn't, you know, women don't deserve to be abused.
Right,
Because
and
this
that's
is
the,
their
and
job.
especially if you start to have it like once there's a client list of, it's like someone goes to check in and it's like, oh nah, you got arrested 2 years ago for like hitting a woman at a brothel in New York, so no, you're actually not, no, we're not going to serve you here, you can fucking go somewhere else, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's kind of that is the kind of thing that I think it would be good to see. because it's like if you just decriminalize it, like women, like so women who are prostitutes, like they can lose their children. They're like they're being told they're in denial about how damaging sex work is to their families. And capitalism is then used as a tool to, like, it's quote, used as a tool to outright punish sex workers. Landlords are forced to evict them because otherwise, like, because then the landlords are living off of the money from prostitution. Wow. Sex workers can get denied bank accounts and loans in Norway because of their job. And even partners of sex workers are can be arrested as a pimp in Sweden if the sex worker contributes on the books towards bills or rent.
That's crazy.
Because it's, they're making their money off illegal activity. So at the end of the day, it's like, they call this, like, this is what I kind of wanted to, like, end by saying is, like, they call this, like, the world's oldest profession, right? And just, like, decriminalizing, just, like, criminalizing drug use hasn't stopped people from, like, getting drugs and doing drugs. You know what I mean? Like, criminalizing prostitution and sex work and making it harder for sex workers to be safe has not really, like, helped them, you know what I mean, in any way. It's only helped the people who exploit them. And I think that, as fucked up as, like, people might consider paying someone to take a shit on your chest, it's kind of like, it's better for you and the person taking a shit and the person who owns the place where the shit is being taken if it's all done on the books, you know what I mean?
With security.
Right?
That wasn't my chest.
Right? It's like, let's make sure the person taking a shit, like, doesn't have Ebola, So, on the stigma around being, having a poop taken on your chest, when we return.
It's not safe.
Cool. Welcome back to Three Thoughts. Last but certainly not least is Die for Ty, talking about the stigma around porn, and take it away.
What's up? So I want to talk about more about sort of like exploitation in the porn industry toward the end. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the stigma, because a lot of the reason that people are exploited is because of how society, the mainstream society, feels about people. So I don't even know where to start. So first of all, sexism. It is a lot different for women in the porn industry than men. Men aren't, I don't know if they're raped, and if they are, they're not raped nearly as much. They're not drugged nearly as much. So there's a problem with the respect for women. I mean, that's pretty obvious, I think. I mean, that's obvious on multiple like layers of everything, but I can't even get to all that right now. It'd take all day. Women in the porn industry are often exploited and then afterwards kind of ignored. And it's a mixture of people not being kind of like honest about porn or honest about sex in general too, and the sexism that women go through. Just an example of the sexism before I move on to the next part. Women sex workers are murdered at very, very like high rates in comparison. Women sex workers are murdered in way higher rates than men. Just fucked up. I'm not saying they should all be killed equally or whatever, but we already talked about them, the whole thing.
It's just like maybe there's like more of this deep rooted like hate and stigma towards like men who do towards women who do sex work than towards men.
Well, and just women, and women in general. We have a culture of violence against women. Like it's.
Do you guys remember that cop? His name is his name right here. His name is Daniel Holtzclaw. He went around.
Yes.
He raped a bunch of.
He was a police officer who raped prostitutes.
He was a police officer.
Maybe.
He got 237 years in jail, thankfully, but he got away with it so much, and he thought that he can get away with it because they were poor black sex workers. And you know, it's just that like women are at risk in general, you know, like no matter what they do, kind of. And then sex work and the stigma with that, it makes it very fucked up. And then also with the porn industry and sex in general being such a taboo topic, people tend to not care about what happens to any porn star or in porn at all. They think that people deserve it for going in the industry.
Yeah.
You know, like it sucks.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it, a lot of like it leads to a lot of the exploitation that we were talking about earlier. You know, them getting manipulated, drugged, etc. And that's in the porn industry that is like already regulated, and it needs to be regulated more, and it needs to be talked about all the time. Sex needs to be talked about in general. And that question you had before, Bryan, with the if it should be like if it's considered art, should it be
porn? Yeah. The question was if porn is if porn is art, is it obligated to be more ethical than other types of art, like video games, like comparable art, like video games, movies, like non-pornographic of this? Is it obligated to be more ethical than those, and why or why not?
So I was thinking about this question the whole time, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And I was thinking, I've been watching all these documentaries on the industry of sex workers, porn industry, cam industry, and stuff like that.
Okay.
And even though I've seen some very like positive ones, have yet to see like an actual person making a porn or a porn that was any in the least bit educational in comparison to movies, video games, or any type of other art that exists. Like maybe there does exist some, like, but it seems very rare. So I don't know if there should be, like, if it's crazy that there's not any that I can think of.
What, like
sex education?
Sex education, like porn that is like more like not.
Pornhub totally has
like,
educational porn. They invest in that. Like that's
really?
That's like one of the
what
things.
What is that? Like what the fuck?
I was gonna say, I don't know if I've ever watched it. I'm just saying, like, they spend a lot of money on STI, and they have a whole channel dedicated to education.
Yeah.
Because they're fucking one of the most trafficked websites on the planet, and it's part of. I actually have a lot of respect for them for doing that, because I think it's very like. The efforts that they go to take down non-consensual videos and the efforts that they put into educating people, I actually think are... Because you think about, like, old school Playboy, right? And how fucking... Hunter S. Thompson used to write for old school Playboy, you know what I mean? David Foster Wallace, like, titans of literature used to contribute to that, and it used to have, like, a lot of literary and educational value, like, painted around the porn, you know what I mean? And... at the end of the day, I think, there's like, to say that porn is not art, you kind of like take away from a lot of the beauty of the human body. I think you take away a lot of like, I think you're kind of pretending there's not a lot. Like, it's kind of like video games, man. It's like there's shitty non-art, non-thinking video games that are basically just violence porn, but there's also like very